It was a picture-perfect day. The late spring sun cast a golden glow over the outdoor wedding venue, a sprawling garden surrounded by tall oak trees. Rows of white chairs lined the manicured lawn, facing a floral arch adorned with cascading roses and hydrangeas. A soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, blending with the faint hum of classical music played by a live quartet. Family and friends filled the seats, their chatter creating a warm and lively atmosphere. Before we move on to telling this story, we want to hear your opinion. Write to us in the comments, what is your name and where are you looking from? Your support is very important to us and helps our growing channel to develop and reach more people. Every comment, every like, every post brings us closer to creating a community that defends justice. Thank you for participating with us in this important event. For Anthony Carter, this was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. He stood near the altar, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit, trying to calm the butterflies in his stomach. His bride-to-be, Emily Hayes, was everything he thought he had wanted: beautiful, charming, and seemingly kind-hearted. Their love story had captivated those around them, a symbol of overcoming societal boundaries and uniting two different worlds. By Anthony's side was his 7-year-old son, Isaiah, dressed smartly in a miniature suit that matched his father's. Isaiah held the small velvet ring box tightly, practicing the role of ring bearer that he was so proud to play. Anthony glanced down at his son, offering him a reassuring smile. Isaiah grinned back, though there was something in his eyes, an unease that Anthony didn't quite catch in the moment. The guests began to settle into their seats as the wedding coordinator signaled for the ceremony to begin. Emily, still out of sight in the bridal suite, was putting on the finishing touches to her makeup, her designer gown flowing behind her like a cloud. Everyone was waiting for the bride's grand entrance, the crescendo of a love story that had been years in the making. Anthony's heart swelled with emotion as he looked out over the gathering. This was a culmination of his hard work, sacrifices, and dreams, a second chance at love and family after years of being a single parent. He thought of how far he and Isaiah had come, finding stability and happiness despite the challenges of being a single black father in a society that often judged him unfairly. As the music shifted to a soft prelude, signaling the imminent start of the ceremony, Anthony took a deep breath. He glanced at the smiling faces of his friends and family in the crowd, his heart full of gratitude. He thought about how Emily had embraced him despite their cultural differences and welcomed Isaiah into her life, or so he believed. Everything seemed perfect, but the universe had other plans. Just as the wedding march began to play, Isaiah tugged on Anthony's sleeve. At first, Anthony thought his son was nervous about his role, but when he looked down, he saw the fear in Isaiah's tear-filled eyes. The boy's face was pale, his expression trembling with urgency. Anthony knelt to hear what his son had to say, expecting a childlike concern. What he heard instead left him frozen in place, the music and laughter of the day fading into the background. In a voice barely above a whisper, Isaiah revealed the dark secret he had been holding inside. The woman standing just moments away from becoming Anthony's wife, the woman he trusted to be a mother figure to Isaiah, had been abusing him. Isaiah described, in heartbreaking detail, how Emily had hurt him when Anthony wasn't around, leaving bruises and scars that went beyond the physical. She had slapped him, called him hateful names, and demeaned him for being black. The weight of Isaiah's words hit Anthony like a tidal wave. His chest tightened, his hands trembled, and his vision blurred as he tried to comprehend the betrayal. The joy and hope that had filled his heart moments earlier were replaced with a storm of anger, heartbreak, and protectiveness for his son. The idyllic wedding day was shattered in an instant. As Anthony stood, his mind raced. He looked at Isaiah, who clung to him tightly, seeking comfort and safety. One thing was clear, the ceremony would not proceed as planned. Anthony glanced toward the bridal suite, where Emily was preparing for her entrance. The crowd, oblivious to the unfolding crisis, chatted happily, unaware of the storm about to descend. The perfect facade of the day was about to crumble, and Anthony knew there was no going back. The celebration, which had promised to be a day of joy and unity, had transformed into something far darker. The truth had come to light, and Anthony resolved to protect his son, no matter the cost. Isaiah clung to his father's arm, his small hands trembling as he fought back tears. The music of the wedding march swelled in the background, but for Anthony, it was as if the world had gone silent. His heart pounded as he replayed his son's words in his head. He struggled to process what Isaiah had just revealed. Emily, the woman he trusted and loved, had been abusing his child. Anthony dropped to one knee, placing his hands on Isaiah's shoulders. The boy's face was streaked with tears, his usually bright eyes clouded with fear and sadness. Isaiah looked down, ashamed and hesitant, as though he feared his father wouldn't believe him. But Anthony's heart shattered at the sight. His son's pain was undeniable. Gently, Anthony whispered his son's name, urging him to continue. Isaiah's voice wavered as he spoke, recounting the cruel words and violent acts he had endured in secret. He described how Emily had slapped him for talking back, and how she'd insulted him when his father wasn't around, calling him derogatory names that no child should ever hear. She said, "I don't belong here because I'm black," Isaiah confessed, his small frame trembling. She said you wouldn't believe me if I told you." Anthony's stomach churned as he listened, the gravity of Isaiah's words sinking in. He thought back to moments he had dismissed, times when Isaiah seemed unusually quiet after spending time alone with Emily, or when he flinched at her touch. There had been subtle signs, but Anthony had never put them together, blinded by his own love for Emily and his hope for a new family. Anger boiled within him, hot and uncontrollable. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to storm into the bridal suite and confront Emily on the spot. But he knew this wasn't the time for rash decisions. He had to remain calm, for Isaiah's sake. Taking a deep breath, Anthony pulled Isaiah into a protective hug. "I'm here," he whispered, though his voice trembled with emotion. He stroked his son's back, trying to provide the comfort Isaiah so desperately needed. Isaiah's small arms wrapped around his father tightly, as though letting go would mean facing Emily's wrath again. Anthony could feel his son's fear, and it fueled his resolve. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't let anyone hurt Isaiah again. Anthony's mind raced. How could Emily, the woman he had planned to marry, do something so monstrous? She had presented herself as caring and nurturing, always quick with a smile and kind words when others were around. Yet, behind closed doors, she had shown a side of herself that was cruel and hateful. Looking back, Anthony began to piece together the inconsistencies. He recalled the times Emily had dismissed Isaiah's complaints as childish whining, or her insistence that discipline was necessary for a child like him. At the time, he thought she was simply inexperienced with parenting. Now, he realized she had been masking her true intentions. The sounds of the wedding continued in the background. The guests were waiting for Emily's entrance, oblivious to the crisis unfolding just a few feet away. Anthony's chest tightened as he realized the weight of what he had to do. This wasn't just about canceling a wedding, this was about protecting his son and holding Emily accountable for her actions. Anthony stood, lifting Isaiah into his arms. The boy buried his face in his father's shoulder, seeking refuge. Anthony's face hardened with determination. His priority was clear, ensuring Isaiah's safety and confronting the truth head-on. Turning away from the crowd and the wedding coordinator frantically motioning for him to return to the altar, Anthony carried Isaiah toward the parking lot. His mind was set. The ceremony was over. As he reached for his phone, his hands shook, not from fear, but from fury and heartbreak. He dialed 911, his voice steady and firm as he reported what his son had told him. "My son has been abused," he explained to the operator. "I need someone to come here right away." The operator assured him that help was on the way, and Anthony hung up, his focus entirely on Isaiah. He kissed the top of his son's head, silently vowing that he would never let anyone harm him again. The idyllic wedding day was unraveling rapidly. But for Anthony, the truth was a painful necessity. His heart ached as he thought about the trust he had placed in Emily and how she had betrayed not just him but the child he loved more than anything in the world. As he waited for the authorities to arrive, Anthony glanced back at the venue, where laughter and music continued to mask the dark reality beneath the surface. Emily, oblivious to the storm coming her way, was preparing to walk down the aisle. Little did she know, the man waiting at the altar wasn't there to marry her, he was there to ensure she faced justice. As the police sirens echoed in the distance, Anthony's heart pounded with a mix of fury and determination. With Isaiah safely sitting in the back seat of his car, comforted by a kind stranger, a venue staff member who offered to stay with him, Anthony made his way back toward the bridal suite. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of betrayal pressing on his shoulders. He wasn't sure how he would confront Emily, but he knew the moment had come to unmask the truth. The bridal suite was a picture of serenity, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing outside. Emily stood in front of a full-length mirror, her white gown flowing elegantly as she adjusted her veil. The makeup artist packed up her brushes, oblivious to the chaos looming. Emily radiated an image of perfection, but Anthony now saw her for who she truly was. As Anthony entered the room, the atmosphere shifted. Emily turned, her expression shifting from surprise to confusion at the sight of his steely glare. The room fell silent as Anthony, his voice trembling with controlled anger, confronted her about Isaiah's revelations. Emily's response was instant and defensive. She denied everything, her voice rising in protest as she accused Isaiah of lying or misunderstanding her actions. She painted herself as the victim, claiming she was only trying to discipline Isaiah because Anthony had been too lenient. Her words dripped with false innocence, but Anthony saw through the facade. The commotion drew attention, and soon, members of the wedding party began gathering outside the suite, whispering and peeking through the door. The once celebratory atmosphere was replaced by confusion and growing unease. The tension in the air was palpable. Anthony, unwavering in his resolve, detailed what Isaiah had told him, about the slaps, the cruel insults, and the racist remarks. Emily's face twisted, her mask of composure cracking as the accusations mounted. Her calm demeanor gave way to anger as she lashed out, accusing Anthony of choosing his son over her, of sabotaging their future together. "You're damn right I'm choosing my son," Anthony snapped, his voice low but seething with emotion. At that moment, the police arrived, their presence immediately commanding attention. 2 officers entered the bridal suite, their expressions professional yet concerned as Anthony stepped aside to explain the situation. Emily's face paled as she realized the gravity of what was happening. Isaiah was brought in briefly to recount his experiences to the officers. His small voice trembled as he spoke, but his words were clear and unwavering. Emily, still clinging to her innocence, tried to interject, but the officers silenced her, asking her to remain seated. As the officers listened to Isaiah and noted his visible bruises, the mood in the room shifted further. The damning evidence of her abuse became impossible to ignore. One of the officers retrieved a small recorder from their pocket, asking Anthony and Isaiah to repeat the timeline of events. Emily's attempts to discredit their story fell flat, her voice growing increasingly desperate. The gathered guests outside murmured among themselves, shock and disbelief evident on their faces. Friends and family who had once admired Emily now struggled to reconcile the accusations with the woman they thought they knew. When the officers asked Emily to stand, she froze. "Are you arresting me?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "Yes, ma'am," one officer replied calmly. "You're being detained for questioning regarding allegations of child abuse and assault." As the cuffs clicked around Emily's wrists, the room erupted into chaos. Her mother, who had been lingering nearby, cried out in disbelief, rushing toward her daughter. Anthony stood rooted in place, watching as the woman he once loved was led out of the room, her once pristine wedding dress now a glaring symbol of disgrace. The whispers turned to gasps as Emily was escorted past the wedding guests. The fairy tale wedding they had gathered to witness had transformed into a nightmare. Cameras that were meant to capture joyful moments now recorded her being taken away in handcuffs. Anthony returned to Isaiah, who had been waiting outside the venue. He scooped up his son, holding him tightly as the boy buried his face in his father's shoulder. Anthony felt a wave of relief that Isaiah's voice had been heard, though the day's events had left deep emotional scars on them both. The wedding was over, but the fallout had just begun. The guests dispersed in disbelief, and the venue staff hurried to pack away the decorations. For Anthony and Isaiah, this was not the end, it was the beginning of a long road to healing and seeking justice. As they drove away from what should have been the happiest day of Anthony's life, he made a silent vow to never let anyone hurt his son again. Isaiah deserved safety, love, and respect, and Anthony would ensure he had all three, no matter what it took. The investigation into Emily's actions began immediately following her arrest. The authorities took the allegations of abuse seriously, and their first step was to ensure that Isaiah was in a safe environment. Anthony, devastated but resolute, agreed to cooperate fully with the police to provide them with the evidence needed to build a strong case. At the police station, officers conducted a formal interview with Isaiah in the presence of a child advocate. His account was detailed and heartbreaking. He described how Emily had begun to treat him differently soon after she moved in with his father. When Anthony wasn't around, Emily's demeanor shifted from kind to cruel. She called him names, mocked his skin color, and berated him for minor mistakes. Her insults were laced with racist undertones, words no child should ever hear. Isaiah spoke hesitantly about the physical abuse, recounting how Emily would slap his hands or push him roughly if he made noise while playing or accidentally spilled something. On one occasion, she had grabbed him by the arm so forcefully that it left a bruise. Isaiah had kept silent, afraid that telling his father would make things worse. The police carefully documented every word, comparing Isaiah's testimony to the visible bruises on his arms. Photographs were taken to preserve evidence, and they assured Anthony that Isaiah's courage in speaking up was critical to holding Emily accountable. Meanwhile, investigators began piecing together a timeline of events. They interviewed the wedding guests, venue staff, and neighbors who had interacted with Emily in recent months. Some guests admitted that they had noticed a subtle tension between Emily and Isaiah but had dismissed it as a stepmother struggling to adjust to her new role. Others mentioned moments when Emily seemed impatient or dismissive of Isaiah in public. The evidence began to mount. Text messages retrieved from Emily's phone painted a troubling picture. In conversations with a close friend, she complained about Isaiah, referring to him in derogatory terms and expressing frustration about raising someone else's child. In one particularly damning exchange, Emily admitted that she had slapped Isaiah during a heated moment, justifying it as discipline. Forensic evidence also came into play. The authorities examined Anthony's home, looking for any additional signs of abuse. In Isaiah's bedroom, they found torn pieces of paper where the boy had scrawled words like stupid and bad in what appeared to be childish frustration. These scraps hinted at the emotional toll Emily's behavior had taken on him. Anthony, heartbroken by the revelations, provided his own testimony. He recounted how Emily had always seemed loving and patient in his presence. He admitted feeling guilty for not noticing the signs of Isaiah's distress earlier but explained that Emily had been careful to maintain her facade when he was around. The investigation also uncovered troubling patterns in Emily's past. A former co-worker came forward to share stories of Emily's temper and her tendency to bully subordinates. Another ex-partner described her as controlling and manipulative, though he had not witnessed anything resembling abuse. As the case developed, the community's reaction was divided. Some rallied behind Anthony and Isaiah, condemning Emily's actions and offering their support. Others were shocked and skeptical, struggling to reconcile the image of the poised bride-to-be with the alleged abuser described in police reports. Emily, out on bail while awaiting trial, continued to deny the allegations. Her defense attorney painted a narrative of misunderstanding, arguing that Emily's actions had been mischaracterized and that her attempts at discipline were being weaponized against her. They pointed to her lack of prior criminal history and claimed that the charges were exaggerated. But the evidence told a different story. The bruises on Isaiah's arms, the text messages, and the testimony from witnesses painted a picture of deliberate cruelty, fueled by bias and resentment. For Anthony, the investigation was a painful but necessary process. He supported Isaiah through every step, ensuring that his son felt safe and heard. He also began therapy sessions for both of them, determined to rebuild the trust and security that had been shaken by Emily's actions. The investigation's findings were damning, and prosecutors prepared to take the case to court. Anthony was resolute in his decision to seek justice, not just for Isaiah but for every child who had endured similar abuse in silence. Emily's actions had fractured their family, but Anthony vowed to protect his son from further harm, no matter the cost. As the trial date approached, the weight of the truth began to settle over everyone involved. Emily's carefully constructed image had crumbled, revealing the dark reality beneath. The investigation had illuminated the depths of her actions, setting the stage for a courtroom battle that would ultimately determine her fate. The courtroom was packed as Emily's trial began, the air heavy with anticipation and tension. Reporters lined the back rows, their notebooks and cameras poised to capture every moment of what had become a high-profile case. The public had taken a keen interest in the proceedings, drawn in by the shocking allegations of child abuse layered with themes of racism and betrayal. Emily sat at the defendant's table, dressed in a conservative outfit that seemed carefully chosen to convey innocence. Her once confident demeanor had faded, she now appeared pale and tense, her eyes darting nervously across the room. Seated a few feet away were Anthony and Isaiah, a stark contrast to Emily's isolation. Anthony's expression was stoic, his protective arm around his son. The prosecution wasted no time presenting its case. They opened with a series of photographs depicting the bruises on Isaiah's arms, the physical evidence of Emily's abuse. Each image was projected onto a large screen for the jury to see, a grim reminder of the harm inflicted on a child who had done nothing to deserve it. Next, the prosecution called Isaiah to testify. The courtroom fell silent as the boy took the stand, his small frame dwarfed by the chair. Isaiah's voice was soft but steady as he recounted the abuse he had endured. He spoke of the cruel words Emily used, how she would shove him or slap his hands when no one else was around, and the times she mocked him for his skin color. His testimony was raw and heart-wrenching, bringing tears to many in the room. The prosecution then turned to the text messages retrieved from Emily's phone. They read aloud the derogatory language she had used when referring to Isaiah in private conversations with friends. Phrases like, "not my problem," and "he's just a brat," painted a clear picture of her disdain. The messages revealed Emily's true feelings, contradicting the image of a loving stepmother she had tried to project. Witnesses were called to corroborate the evidence. A neighbor testified to hearing raised voices and Isaiah crying on several occasions when Anthony was not home. The bartender at the wedding venue recounted seeing Emily scold Isaiah harshly during the rehearsal dinner, an incident that had seemed excessive even at the time. The most damning testimony came from the forensic psychologist who had interviewed Isaiah. The psychologist explained the emotional toll Emily's behavior had taken on the boy. They described how Isaiah had internalized her insults, leading to feelings of worthlessness and confusion about his identity. The psychologist emphasized the lasting impact of such abuse, highlighting the importance of accountability. Emily's defense team attempted to counter the onslaught of evidence. They argued that the bruises on Isaiah's arms could have been accidental, the result of rough play or minor mishaps. They framed the text messages as venting taken out of context, claiming that Emily had been overwhelmed with the pressures of a blended family. But their arguments failed to resonate. The jury was visibly affected by Isaiah's testimony and the weight of the evidence against Emily. Her claims of being misunderstood rang hollow in the face of her documented behavior. The turning point came when the prosecution cross-examined Emily herself. On the stand, she appeared defensive and evasive, her answers often contradicting the evidence presented. Her attempts to downplay her actions only solidified the impression of guilt. When asked directly about the text messages and the bruises, her responses were riddled with half-truths and denials that left the jury unconvinced. The closing arguments from the prosecution were compelling and direct. They reminded the jury of the fundamental duty to protect vulnerable children and condemned Emily's actions as both abusive and rooted in prejudice. They framed the case as not just about Isaiah's suffering but about sending a message that such behavior could not be tolerated. After several hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts of child abuse and racial discrimination. Emily's sentencing was harsh but appropriate, reflecting the severity of her actions. She was given a significant prison term and ordered to undergo counseling as part of her rehabilitation. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and somber reflection. For Anthony, the verdict was a vindication of his son's courage and a step toward healing. For Isaiah, it was a chance to move forward without the shadow of abuse hanging over him. Emily's downfall was complete. Once poised to become part of a happy family, her cruel and prejudiced actions had led to her disgrace and punishment. The case became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the consequences of cruelty and bias. As Emily was led away in handcuffs, Anthony held Isaiah close, silently promising that their future would be brighter and free from harm. They had faced darkness together, and now, justice had been served. In the aftermath of the trial, Anthony and Isaiah were left to navigate a path forward, their lives forever altered by the events they had endured. The courtroom drama, media scrutiny, and emotional weight of the trial had taken their toll. Yet, as the dust began to settle, a sense of relief and hope started to emerge. For Isaiah, the process of healing was slow but steady. Anthony, determined to rebuild a safe and loving environment for his son, prioritized his emotional well-being. Therapy sessions became a cornerstone of their routine. Isaiah, with the guidance of a compassionate child psychologist, began to unpack the feelings of fear, confusion, and hurt that Emily's abuse had caused. Through art therapy, Isaiah found a way to express himself. His drawings, once filled with dark and muted colors, gradually transformed into vibrant depictions of superheroes, animals, and sunny landscapes. These images were a testament to his resilience and a hopeful sign that he was beginning to reclaim his childhood. Anthony, too, had his own emotional journey. He grappled with guilt, questioning how he had missed the signs of Isaiah's suffering. Though the court's decision had validated his instincts and actions, he couldn't shake the weight of regret. He sought counsel from a therapist who helped him process these emotions and reminded him that his swift action upon learning the truth had ultimately protected his son. The father and son leaned on one another, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Weekend outings to the park, movie nights at home, and simple moments of laughter became their new normal. These shared experiences were small but meaningful steps toward creating a life free from the shadows of the past. The community that had rallied around Anthony and Isaiah during the trial continued to offer support. Friends and neighbors organized playdates for Isaiah, ensuring he was surrounded by love and friendship. Some even wrote letters to local media outlets, highlighting the courage it took for Anthony and Isaiah to stand up against abuse and prejudice. Amid this period of recovery, Anthony made a conscious decision to reflect on the deeper implications of what had happened. He began volunteering with organizations that supported single parents and children affected by abuse, using his story to raise awareness about the warning signs of mistreatment. His advocacy extended to conversations about racial bias, as he openly discussed how prejudice had enabled Emily's behavior to go unchecked for so long. Over time, Anthony found himself ready to open his heart again. His experiences with Emily had left him cautious, but he remained optimistic about finding love with someone who would embrace both him and Isaiah wholeheartedly. It was during a parent support meeting that Anthony met Sarah, a kind and compassionate woman who had her own story of overcoming challenges as a single mother. Their connection was immediate, built on mutual respect and shared values. Sarah quickly became a cherished part of Anthony and Isaiah's lives, her warmth and empathy offering the stability and care they needed. Isaiah took to Sarah almost immediately. Her kindness toward him was genuine, and she made an effort to include him in her hobbies and interests. She cheered him on at his school plays, baked his favorite cookies on weekends, and encouraged his love for art by joining him in painting sessions. For Anthony, Sarah represented a second chance, not just at love, but at building the family he had always dreamed of. Their relationship blossomed, and within a year, they exchanged vows in a small, intimate ceremony. Isaiah stood proudly by his father's side as the best man, his smile reflecting the happiness they had all worked so hard to reclaim. The memories of the past didn't disappear entirely, but they no longer held the same power. Anthony and Isaiah had transformed their pain into purpose, their grief into growth. Together, with Sarah now a part of their lives, they looked to the future with optimism and gratitude. The chapter of Emily's abuse had closed, replaced by one of healing, resilience, and unconditional love. For Anthony and Isaiah, the journey was far from easy, but it was proof that even in the face of darkness, hope and light could prevail. Anthony hadn't expected to find love again so soon after the chaos and heartbreak that had consumed his life. His sole focus had been on Isaiah's healing and creating a safe, nurturing environment for his son. Yet life has a way of surprising those who least expect it, and for Anthony, that surprise came in the form of Sarah, compassionate, grounded, and brimming with an empathy that felt both rare and genuine. Sarah and Anthony first met at a community support group for single parents, a space where they were encouraged to share their experiences and struggles. Sarah, a teacher and single mother to a spirited 5-year-old named Emma, had been navigating her own challenges. Her ability to remain optimistic and kind, despite her hardships, immediately stood out to Anthony. Their connection began with small, shared moments, friendly conversations during group meetings, exchanged tips on parenting, and the occasional shared laughter at the absurdities of life as a single parent. As their interactions deepened, Anthony began to realize just how much he admired Sarah, not just for her resilience but for her ability to make those around her feel valued and supported. For Isaiah, Sarah's presence in their lives was a welcome change. She approached him with warmth and patience, respecting the boundaries of a child who had been through so much. Unlike Emily, who had used her proximity to Anthony to mask her cruelty, Sarah made genuine efforts to connect with Isaiah. She asked about his favorite superheroes, joined him in his art projects, and listened intently when he spoke about his school day. Isaiah quickly grew attached to Sarah's daughter, Emma. Their bond formed naturally, as they spent afternoons building forts out of couch cushions, racing toy cars, and painting masterpieces that often ended in giggles and colorful messes. For Anthony, seeing Isaiah laughing again, truly laughing, was a gift he hadn't realized how much he needed. Anthony and Sarah's relationship deepened with time. She became someone he could confide in, someone who understood his fears and regrets without judgment. He shared the guilt he still carried over missing the signs of Emily's abuse, and Sarah reassured him that his actions to protect Isaiah had proven his strength as a father. Their first official date was simple but memorable, a picnic in the park with their children, complete with sandwiches, a frisbee, and plenty of laughter. As the children played under the afternoon sun, Anthony and Sarah talked about everything from childhood memories to their hopes for the future. By the end of the day, it was clear to both of them that this was more than a fleeting connection, it was the beginning of something meaningful. As their relationship grew, Sarah became an integral part of Anthony and Isaiah's lives. She attended Isaiah's school art shows, cheered him on at his soccer games, and even helped him organize a surprise Father's Day breakfast for Anthony. Her presence brought a sense of stability and joy that had been missing for so long. Anthony, in turn, became a supportive figure in Emma's life. He took her to the park, read her bedtime stories, and helped her build the dollhouse she'd been dreaming of for months. Together, the four of them began to feel like a family, a blended unit built on mutual respect and love. When Anthony decided to propose, he did so with Isaiah's full support. The two of them planned the proposal together, crafting a heartfelt speech and creating a banner that read, "Will you marry us?" The moment was intimate and emotional, held in the same park where their first date had taken place. Sarah's teary-eyed yes marked the start of a new chapter in all their lives. Their wedding was a celebration of second chances and new beginnings. Held in a small garden surrounded by close friends and family, the ceremony was simple but filled with love. Isaiah stood proudly as Anthony's best man, and Emma, dressed in a flower crown, walked down the aisle scattering petals with joyful abandon. As Anthony and Sarah exchanged vows, they promised not only to love and cherish each other but also to build a life rooted in kindness, understanding, and mutual respect for their children. Their union wasn't just about the two of them, it was about creating a home where Isaiah and Emma could thrive. For Anthony, finding love again wasn't about replacing the past but embracing the future. Sarah didn't erase the scars left by Emily's betrayal, but she helped him see that those scars didn't define him. Together, they built a life that honored resilience, celebrated healing, and prioritized the happiness of their children. Their love story wasn't perfect, but it was real, a testament to the power of forgiveness, growth, and the belief that even after the darkest times, second chances can lead to a brighter future. Anthony stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes on a lazy Saturday morning as Isaiah and Emma giggled over a game of cards at the dining table. The aroma of fresh coffee and maple syrup filled the air, mingling with the sound of laughter. It was moments like these that reminded Anthony how far they had come. A home once marked by pain and uncertainty was now overflowing with love and joy. The past year had been transformative. Anthony and Sarah had settled into their blended family life with remarkable ease. Isaiah thrived in the nurturing environment Sarah helped create, his confidence blossoming as he realized he was loved and valued. Emma, too, had found a sense of security and belonging with Anthony as her steadfast stepfather. Together, they navigated the ups and downs of parenting, from scraped knees to school projects, with a shared commitment to building a home rooted in kindness and trust. Isaiah no longer carried the weight of fear he once had. With therapy and the unwavering support of his father and Sarah, he had learned to express his emotions and reclaim his sense of safety. His bond with Sarah had grown strong, and he often referred to her as Mom Sarah, without prompting, a sign of the love and respect they had built. Anthony had found his own healing in the process. Letting go of the guilt he carried for not recognizing Emily's abuse hadn't been easy, but Sarah's unwavering belief in his strength as a father had helped him move forward. Through his advocacy work, Anthony had also found purpose. He partnered with local organizations to raise awareness about child abuse and racial discrimination, using his family's story to inspire change and offer hope to others. For Sarah, the journey had been equally meaningful. She'd found a partner in Anthony who respected and cherished her, and she'd built a loving relationship with Isaiah, proving that love could transcend biology. Her connection with Emma had also deepened as they adjusted to the new dynamics of their blended family. One sunny afternoon, the family gathered for a picnic in the same park where Anthony had proposed to Sarah. They spread out a blanket under the shade of a large oak tree, unpacking sandwiches, fruit, and homemade cookies. Isaiah and Emma raced to the playground, their laughter echoing across the park. As Anthony and Sarah sat side by side, watching the children play, they reflected on how far they had come. Their journey had been anything but easy, marked by betrayal, heartbreak, and the long road to healing. But through it all, they had found strength in one another and created a family that embraced love, resilience, and second chances. The picnic ended with a family tradition Sarah had introduced, writing notes of gratitude to one another. Isaiah proudly held up his note, scribbled in colorful crayon, "Thank you for being the best dad ever and for finding Mom Sarah. I love our family." Emma's note was a drawing of the four of them holding hands, the sun beaming down on their smiling faces. As Anthony read Isaiah's note, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. For so long, he had feared he'd failed his son, but now he saw a boy who was happy, safe, and loved. The day ended with the family sprawled on the couch, watching a movie while sharing a bowl of popcorn. As the credits rolled and the children dozed off in their arms, Anthony and Sarah exchanged a quiet look of contentment. Their lives weren't perfect, but they were whole, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the courage to keep moving forward. For Anthony and his family, this was their happy ending, not a fairy tale, but a life they had worked to build together. It was filled with laughter, support, and the promise of brighter days ahead. As he held Sarah's hand and kissed Isaiah goodnight, Anthony knew this was the future he had always dreamed of, and finally, it was theirs.